I don't think they can hear me, but whatever.
We can hear you now, Russ.
Okay, good.
Oh, Russ, a little. Okay.
I can't hear you now.
Fine.
All right. Flag salute. To the flag of the United States
United States of America.
one nation under God, indivisible.
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Time we allow topics from the floor. 5 minutes. It's not on the public agenda already. Yeah. We have a burning desire to. Mr. Mount?
Okay. My name is Brady Prince. I'm here to talk about the appointment of Charles Townsend to the Planning Commission. The city code of ethics for all your commissions under your leadership states that officials should have have credible personal conduct and are personally honest. In addition, your resolution 1509 of the city council states that the desire to ensure and promote an environment of honesty, integrity, impartiality, openness, and transparency in all of its affairs. Mr. Kaiser does not meet those definitions. It is disturbing to me that the council and the planning commission would not follow your own code of ethics when making appointments to the city council or to the planning commission. Some of you may not have been aware of the issue that surrounding Mr. Kasner and his wife, who had filed a false police report against me. And there's an ongoing lawsuit against that. They continue to make these false claims within this community and to other people until a copy of the video was made. After the video was appeared, then they stopped making that claim and actually did write a letter saying that, oh yeah, we had mistaken and that wasn't true. I had made Mr. Kasner's actions known to certain members of your planning commission in the hopes that those members would find that Mr. Kasner's actions would be inappropriate and unacceptable to your commission. Apparently that information did not get to all of you, despite the serious nature of the accusations that are against him. I personally chose not to participate in your interview process just because I didn't want it to become about personalities. And I knew that you had at least 2 other qualified people that could have been serving on this board. I certainly understand Mr. Steve Topaz's vote from the city council to confirm Mr. Kasner because he has personally demonstrated time and time again a willingness to lie on council for both his own personal and professional gain. What I don't understand is that Mr. Patrick did not bother to read an email that was sent to him. Besides emailing the mayor, the council president, the city administrator, and the city recorder, along with each individual councilor, Mr. Patrick decided that he didn't have the email and couldn't read it and didn't take the time to read it. And certainly could have given the opportunity, should have postponed that vote until he saw the email. It's surprising to me that someone would vote on a topic as important as a commission appointment without having all the facts in front of him. They should have either recused themselves or postponed the vote. The city council is one of the highest paid councils in the state. I feel like I need a refund. This appointment taints your entire commission, as well as the city council. There's an old saying that says, if you lie with pigs, you're gonna get dirty. This appointment dirties the planning commission and the entire council. I believe it's the first time in history that an appointment was not unanimous, especially when the mayor and your council president voted against it. This appointment should not be controversial. There should not be a controversy when you're having someone in this commission. Integrity matters. And I think that your council now shows that integrity doesn't matter. And every decision that you make from this point forward is going to reflect that.
This, Mr. Freeheim, after the meeting, I did find the email. It ended up in the junk folder. I don't know why. So that is why I did not see it beforehand.
For that, I do have to say I was on the selection committee and I was not aware of any of those issues. Not the rest of the committee, but
Are you inviting comments for the committee from the committee? I just want to know.
sure.
I've seen the video and I'm not privy to all the allegations. And I 100% confident Mr. Kasner's integrity, no doubts about it whatsoever. I understand that at times there are conflicts between people and there are disagreements. Disagreements between Mr. Freeheim, Mr. Kasner, and his wife are being sorted out in civil court, where all the evidence can be heard and legal arguments to be put forth and judged in court of law. There's differences of opinion, and I could say that I was aware of these issues, and I didn't. And I'm also very familiar with Mr. Kasner and his abilities and what he brings to this planning commission. And I believe he's an excellent selection by the planning commission interviewing committee, and also fully support the council's confirmation of him. And I'm making no judgments, because fact of the matter is I'm not sitting as a judge of that case. That case hopefully will resolve. And if it doesn't resolve, a jury will speak, and then we will know what a jury thought.
The planning commission just made a recommendation to the council. It's the council's final decision on who was selected for the planning commission. All right. Interesting. Other topics from the floor? We got a short time. Oh, yes. Okay.
There. Good evening. I guess I'm the aforementioned Charles Kastner.
In person.
Good to meet you. Last time you were on the big screen. As Mr. Toski pointed out, this is a current litigation. I will say that, one statement that Mr. Freeheim just made was false before the commission here, and that is that somehow somebody wrote a letter admitting that what we had said before was wrong. That's completely untrue. There's no truth to that whatsoever. Again, there's a difference of opinion. Charges were filed. We did drop those charges just because the local prosecutor said it would be hard, for that type of thing to be, taken before court. So there's a lot of things going on. The fact that he's called into question my integrity as being an officer of the court myself, lawyer, I take very, very seriously. It's a very close to being defamation per se. And again, we'll fight those in the court battle and not really anything to do with the commission. But I stand fully behind my integrity and would answer any questions that would come along in that way. And, look to, I guess, resolve this in the courts. So, thank you.
Let's move on to the agenda. First thing of the minutes. Second.
Comment.
Oops.
Just a minute.
Under page 505, under the motion upon Commissioner Toski's motion and Vice Chair Hubbard's second, the Planning Commission unanimously resolved. The word is resolved. We made a resolution and it was, we resolved to have the city administrator. I would only say that, and I went and looked up the word before I came here. So I would request that that word approved change to resolved.
In both of these motions,
Just under
the first motion.
the first motion. Yeah, I didn't check on the second one, so I have no comment on the second one other than to approve.
We've got a motion and a second with one correction. All in favor?
Aye.
So there to be an amended motion. Has to be an amended motion
Oh,
of approval.
I thought that's what we did.
We did. Okay, there it is.
second on the amended.
It's seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Russ?
His mouth moved.
Hanging out, John Gump.
Can you hear me?
You can't hear you, Rob.
My connection's a little weak right now.
No, yeah, there's something wrong.
Get that resolved so we can do part of
My
the
connection is weak.
process.
I'm not sure that it's our. He's not muted.
Okay, well, he gave the thumbs up, so
Okay, we're done
got
with that then.
there's something positive.
Hopefully he can communicate more than that. Meeting. Okay. Time is now 7:11 PM. The public hearing is now open. The quasi-judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for historic resource review. The subject property is identified in the county map as lot 600 on map 4N173. Is Brendan Hart. The owner is Columbia County. Those quasi-judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities. We will take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte conflict of interest or bias on this matter?
I do. I am a director with the Columbia County Museum Association and Historical Society. I participated in meetings with the applicant regarding the relocation of the museum to the location. So I don't know that it affects my decision whatsoever.
If the audience object to the ability of the commission to make a decision. All right. Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations and decisions. The final statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the city code and ORS 197.7635. The following is a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. City of St. Helens Municipal Code 17.36.0403, criteria for alteration. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria as described, or other criteria in the plan, such as the comprehensive plan or land use regulation, such as that found in the development code, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing, in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue, and precludes an action for damages to circuit court. Staff, you have a report for us?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. So first of all, if you're astute with your perception, you would notice that the staff report says from Jennifer M. Show. She's ill today, and I'm her. You can tell she's really ill because she looks like me. I have reviewed this stuff. I've talked to her about it. I just say that because when you're working on a staff report, as someone who's reviewing it and, well, what about this, what about that? It's a different mentality than reviewing it or working on it in the scenario where you're presenting. So I just found out today. So if it's a little quirky, my apologies. But this first item, this is a historic resource review. This is not something that comes up that often, but you are putting on your hats as the Historic Landmarks Commission tonight. So you are the Historic Landmarks Commission right now. And these come up when an alteration is proposed for one of our official historic resources. Designated landmarks is the fancy term that we apply to those. And the John Gum School is one of those resources. Columbia County purchased it. They wish to establish government offices and a museum in there. And they have some modifications for that. Now, what you're reviewing right now are specifically the alterations as it pertains to the historic resource. There's also a recommendation component, just to make it even more confusing, for modifications to the property that are not to the building itself. The building is the historic resource, the property is not. So we get into the architectural standards a little bit as well. What this doesn't do is get into the site development standards. That is a separate land use application that we have, and it's been worked on, but will be done administratively. So just so you understand, what buckets of stuff that we're dealing with. So the John Gum School, we all know it, we all love it, and we're glad to see something happen to it so it can remain for years to come. It's been around for a long time. It was built in 1919, and just it's that classic issue of towns from the 19th and 20th century, early 20th century, where there was a fire, burned the original one, and a new one was built. And on the 9th of September 16th, 1918, that's when the old one was destroyed. So this is the new school replacing the one that burned. And it's constructed of, at least what was thought at the time, more fire-resistant materials. It was a school up until the 1999-2000 year. That was the last time you had a school in the building. After that, it was determined to be unsafe. It was closed. And then in the early 2000s, there was some permitting to establish some commercial uses and office uses in the main floor, with the second floor remaining in an unoccupied state. And then, of course, the county bought it recently, and that's why we're here today, as I mentioned. So the things that pertain to the historic resource component, there's some new wall signage proposed, restoration of original windows, doors, and other architectural features, removal of a non-original wheelchair lift on the west face of the site. Some balcony restoration, removal of some non-original exterior stairs on the west and east sides. And some new guardrails and handrails. There's a new trash and mechanical enclosure. It's on the ground, but it is adjacent and essentially attached to the building. And so that's why we believe it falls within this category. And then some new building lighting as well. Now, when we talk about the architectural standards, and the architectural standards is a recommendation to the approval authority, in which case the staff. You are the approval authority for the modifications to the building itself. But the ones where your recommendation falls under is a new emergency generator enclosure adjacent to the old former covered playground. There's a building in the back. It has that mural of the mermaid, its head, whatever it is. And then also a new freestanding sign is proposed. So there's a lot of criteria. There's 12. We could talk about those in detail and be here till 1 a.m. But typically I don't like to do that for staff reports and just hit the stuff that, we, in reading it, we felt was discussion worthy. If though, in your own research, you find things that you felt are worthy that we didn't discuss, feel free to bring them up. That's why we have this meeting, and that's why we have a group of you to help decide on these things. So let me just talk about some of the things, like I said, we thought was discussion worthy and like, well, maybe the planning commission should think about this. So first of all,
Before we get into that, so some of those have been on this planning commission for a little while. Remember when the county first got it, there were some alterations proposed that we approved. So what happened to those?
they expired.
Okay,
And so part of this is deja vu.
okay.
We're gonna talk about that, and then it's just broad, the scope is broad.
Okay, so they're similar.
So we're resurrecting, and that's the first thing we're gonna talk about actually, is that's the wheelchair ramp.
Richter flow, but I just wanted to make sure that there was something that was similar to what we had before.
Yeah, it's similar in the first item and then expanded considerably.
Okay,
Right, we're focusing on the whole building, not just that front entry.
and I think we had the east side too.
Yeah, we were picking on that mechanical wheelchair lift.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, yeah, this
Didn't see anything about it.
that was a good question. It's buried in there.
Oh,
Really
really?
does talk about it, but
All right. thank
9 pages of just a bunch of boring text. I don't blame you for missing it. So. And hopefully this first question is easy. So a new accessible ramp, to the main entry of the building. This does require a small removal of the front entry porch, which is not very visible. And can you go Control L and make it full screen? That works. So there is a diagram. Very end. I just want to, there's one of the sheets in here. All right, so here is the wheelchair ramp that we talked about a couple years ago, we're talking about again. And the impact area is, so you're walking up the ramp, and right now, if you walked here, you would have to jump over a concrete wall, which really isn't ADA accessible, and so that needs to be removed.
Yeah, remember that.
And there's a section being removed, which is depicted.
7.1. HRR 7.1 figure.
Do you want me to just?
7.1.
Or 7.1.
Oh, yeah, there it is,
There
okay.
it is.
So, bye-bye. You were okay with that before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we presume you're okay with it getting in, but it is a new application, so you do have a right to think differently about it.
I was the only one last time that wasn't in favor.
It's
Okay.
narrow, it looks really neat.
Well, it doesn't meet code, but then there's some deal in the code, you can go narrower. It's very narrow coming through that column there. And I didn't like putting that out in front of the building. I want to come down to the east side and in there.
And the applicant's representative is here, so they can talk about why they chose what they chose.
What's the width at that point? Are we talking about where the wheelchair needs to go through?
Columns.
What's the number of the
You
width?
have that,
I believe it's 35.5 inches.
What's the ADA code?
So ADA it's typically 36 inches, but it allows for a reduction to 32 for a certain dimension that I don't know offhand. We do think there's a way to have this meet ADA code outright without any request for variance.
So we'll get details from
Shows a
the
picture.
applicant after staff.
All right, thank you.
And keep things flowing. So that's one item to think about. Another one, we go to back of the site, there are some original windows proposed to go away for a mechanical louver. Yeah, here. So this is where the trash enclosure is gonna go. So we're looking at the back side of the building now, and there is an existing window here. Now, I would mention they are talking about restoring a lot of other more visible windows. So this one is supposed to go away with the louver. And so you have to determine.
Jacob, as well, just to be clear, there's two others just around the corner on the same page, the bottom right corner of the bottom elevation on this page that are also proposed to be replaced.
Okay. Yeah, no, that, because I just adopted this today, yeah, not all those details are as sharp.
I think it's fine that he can help you at this point, to adopt it, so it's okay.
Since Jenny was ill and
Be Jenny.
Maybe we move him up to the table.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sure, yeah. It's a little different.
Your stuff out.
Sorry, yeah.
Apologies for that. Answer something he. If you're gonna have a chance to really. go for it there.
so that is, that's an alteration, and it's an alteration in reverse. It's, it's not restoring something, and so you have to feel that that is minimal and not a distinct feature that warrants preservation given the entire scope. So another question that we had. So for the new entry ramp, the ramp wall itself is supposed to be concrete. And then the column space will be removed. There are going to be some exposed surfaces proposed to be finished to match the adjoining surfaces. But we do have some steel hand railing and pickets. And this would be back to that.
6.1.
I think that they're on the front, for example, at the very least. And at this time, the application says color to be determined. And so it was just kind of a question for the commission, whether or not you want to leave it to the design experts for a color, or if you wanted to provide some specificity or at least general guidance, like avoid neon colors. I think most people would do that.
We specified a color last time.
Exterior paint for the building.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
Was it-
exterior. We were beige last time. I think.
So that's what mine.
So in this case, it's to be determined, and so that just left the option open. So that's another thing for your thinking cap. Building lighting. So there's a lot of lights being removed that are not original and new ones added that have that historic element to it. But there are some other lighting features that are minimal as far as their overall impact. Yeah, these wall packs. So, these have historic character. These wall packs are, more modern and practical. But they're also small and probably visually benign, at least, we think they could be considered visually benign. And so we just wanted to give you a chance to, comment on anything, but that was just something we wanted to make sure that you're okay with.
Where are those located at?
There are two, I believe, at the back entrance. The intent of the light fixtures are to meet zoning code requirements for, safe illumination of the site. There are two at the rear of the building, I believe, actually the previous one we were just on.
That one.
Not that one, but the other elevation sheet. Oops,
Reverse or
you almost had it, just the,
am I going the right way?
8.1 is the lighting plan.
here, I can give you the sheet number. I was looking for the rear, the south or rear elevation of the building, which is on 6.2. I'm sorry, they're not well noted, but to scale, they are, right, if I point, it's probably not super useful for people joining virtually, but there are these two small elements here, so they're quite small, and can be finished to match the building's paint color. And then there are two also proposed at either of the east and west existing balconies, so these elements here are also the same light fixture.
They won't be on the front.
Correct.
Let's see, so talking about color, the aluminum louvers, the color of that is also unknown. So again, recommendation of a color or guidance such as avoid reflective finishes, bright unfinished. And then the final question I have, there's a standard. So prior to the alteration, current photographs and or drawings of all elevations shall be provided to the city for its public records. Photographs and drawings shall be archival quality. And, we have good digital copies and these hard copies. The digital theoretically it will last forever. Of course, 100 years from now, will the picture format still be compatible with whatever the technology is at the time? I don't know, a piece of paper can last indefinitely. So it's just a question of, do you want archival, official archival hard copy prints as a condition for memorial sake? And then, so that's the historic resource review component. When we get into the architectural standards, so this is the recommendation bucket. The emergency generator enclosure, which is by the playground, get the site plan. Yeah, so this is the old playground building we're talking about.
4.1 might be a good.
Okay, yeah, so here's the enclosure here. And then a freestanding sign is proposed out here, replacing the one that is there now.
While we're on this page, just can we get dimensions, height, width, length?
Yeah, I'll have to, they'll be general, but I believe the height is approximately 10 feet, which is the height necessary to screen the equipment inside, so it matches the height of the equipment. The generator enclosure, it looks like it's probably about 30 feet by maybe 15 to 18, but it's basically sized to fit the equipment and meet the clearances required for maintenance around it. And then the trash enclosure, which also hosts mechanical equipment, is sized for the condensing units that'll serve the mechanical building or the mechanical system of the building, and the trash dumpsters that'll be in that space. Its size is also somewhat meant to align with the facade of the building at the adjacent stairs, so it kind of strikes, it matches well with the existing fabric of the building, and its north-south dimension is limited by the retaining wall that mitigates the steep grade change of the site.
10 feet high by 30 feet long.
For the
building.
the generator enclosure or the enclosure that's attached to the John Gunn building.
Generator.
The generator enclosure. Yeah, I'm sorry to not have those dimensions immediately offhand, but I'd say 30 by 18 approximately.
Is there a drawing of that building, an elevation drawing, see what that part looks like?
No, I guess to Jacob's point, as part of the site, proposed site work, we didn't include that in this application.
And one of the, just kind of let you know where I was headed on that is just what's gonna be the exterior of that and is, so that I don't know if this is the right point to start discussing it, but that was one of the questions that I had regarding this application.
The materiality is proposed to be lap wood siding, which would match the finish of that playground structure, and painted to match the building as well.
Is that at HRR 6.3?
Yeah, that's an approximation, and then if we may have had a detail included on 7.7. We do have more information on the enclosure that's attached to the John Gunn building.
7.7?
7.7 has so that's not the generator enclosure, but that's the enclosure that houses the mechanical equipment and trash. And you can see the height is also meant to, in that condition, meant to align with the window heads of the building, just to strike a nice architectural alignment. And again, that enclosure is proposed to be clad similar to the outbuilding, the former playground structure, to match the materiality of the site.
Is that the playground structure that's currently kind of is a curved roof and
Yeah, exactly.
Historic building.
it is? When was that built?
Concurrent with the John Gunn building is my understanding.
Most people know that the place.
So, Jacob, do you have any more staff report?
Yeah, so just in that,
Assistance with?
on that recommendation stuff, I've already mentioned that the generator enclosure has vertical lap siding to match existing outbuilding on the site, to match adjacent walls. Where we have that architectural compatibility, and then also the freestanding sign. It's located that it should not obstruct important architectural details, won't obstruct the visual impacts of the school. And then also appropriate materials, which includes galvanized sheet metal. And it's going to be made out of powder coated steel painted to match the building with a bronze finish and aluminum standoff letters. And it has some architectural features including a similar cornice and tabulature, which is just how the windows and everything looks on the building, which staff feels complies. So we recommend approval for the official historic resource review with some conditions. And then, you know, some of those questions that we had that could result into more conditions. That's what I have.
Any questions for staff? Go for staff.
Are there any modifications to the play shed included in the scope of the project?
I guess, before, I don't know where we are at in the process, but before final approval, would there be an I hate to be focusing on this enclosure, which is really beside the point. That's at the back of a parking lot and in front of another building, but it nevertheless has the opportunity to be something that kind of looks good and fits in, or is kind of an eyesore, and I don't really kind of have a vision on what that building's intended to look like. And there's an opportunity there, so is there a plan to have some additional drawings or renderings of that particular building submitted before?
Yeah, and I don't think there's a detailed design in here either.
There is actually on 7.7. Signage is described. No, I'm sorry. That's the one I gave you earlier.
The staff doesn't have a recommendation on the time that we're going to close that closure. We can ask him about.
Well, maybe he wants to give his presentation.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
sorry. You don't have any.
We didn't have any recommended changes.
Okay, all right. That's
But
what I
yeah,
wanted
it's
to-
it's it's
that's where
fully
we're at.
conveyed in this particular packet.
Let's go on to my. So we have the applicant's presentation, and you're right there. So you have something more to Bernie to add that you would like to talk about that Jacob didn't?
No, thank you. So I'm Brendan Hart. I'm with Emmerich Architects, the architects for this proposed project, and wanted to start by thanking the commission for your time today and for your service to the city. Appreciate what you guys do. Thanks also to Jacob and Jenny, who couldn't be here, but they've been really invaluable in guidance throughout this process. We're really excited about this project. The John Gunn Building is a beautiful building, and we're really honored by the opportunity to play a part in its restoration. We think the county's use of it is a wonderful marriage. It's great to find a new life for this building that matches its original civic use with a new one. And we think it's going to be a great benefit for the county, and also hope that it will be beneficial to the community of St. Helens. We're excited by the opportunity to incorporate the county museum into the building, which we think will add life and activity to the community. So we're really excited about this project. Just a quick note on our project team. We're led by Amoresco, who is the owner's representative project manager, has a lot of expertise in complex projects. Our office, Emmerich Architects, has done quite a lot of historic preservation work and adaptive reuse. And it's something we're really passionate about. We have an historic consultant who is helping us to manage this project as a publicly owned building on the National Register, or as a contributing building for a district in a national registry, is required by the state to go through an approval process with SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office. And so that application hasn't yet been submitted. It's ready. And we are confident in its approval. Our historic consultant has confirmed that our proposed work meets the Secretary of the Interior's we're gonna go through that process, and that will be part of our, jurisdictional requirements for the building. And then we also have Bremick Construction as the general contractor for the building, and they do a great job. We've worked with them frequently in the past. They've got a lot of expertise in historic restorations as well, and we're confident that they'll do a great job. The building, Jacob gave a little description of the building's history, built in 1919 to replace a building that was burned down originally. The original school was burned down. Done by notable architect Tortolette Hummel, who also designed the state capitol in Idaho. And in 1999, 2000, the building was converted to commercial use before being purchased by the county. Just a couple notes, maybe a couple, I think Jacob gave a pretty good summary of the proposed alterations, but a couple others to note are at the back of the building, there are currently former window openings. So maybe if possible to navigate to sheet 6.2. Former window openings that let light into the auditorium space that's located inside the building. Those have been infilled subsequently. Currently they're filled with CMU block. What we're proposing is we're hoping to be able to open up 2 of those original window bays of the original 5. That's what we think is structurally viable under current code. Can't do them all, but we're excited by the opportunity to restore that historic feature of the building as much as possible. And then the other alteration that I wanted to point out is you're probably familiar with the exit stairs, the steel exit stairs that are at the sides of the building. Those aren't required by code, current code, and we're proposing their removal as a non-original element of the building that is somewhat of a security risk, but also not a aesthetically attractive element of the current building. But the major architectural features of the building is identified in the National Register, and for our understanding of the building are the entry portico and entry porch, the entry itself, which has elaborate plaster work simulating laid stone, as well as the doors, the entry doors themselves, which are wood, true divided light original doors, as well as the windows of the building throughout most of its facades. And to the extent possible, our goal in this project has been to restore and maintain the historic fabric as much as the budget will allow. So we're proposing the restoration of all windows other than the ones we discussed, which are being proposed for replacement just to meet current mechanical requirements, to bring fresh air and exhaust air to serve the building, as well as well, I guess that's it for major alterations. Let's see. So we think this project is well in alignment with the approval criteria for historic resources. Again, as to the extent possible, we're working to preserve the original fabric, work within the guidance of the Historic Overlay District and the comprehensive plan, and believe that our proposed alterations are consistent with the character of the building, and to the best extent possible honor the historic resource that is the John Gunn building. So I guess that's it for my original presentation, but looking forward to discussing it, and thanks again for your time.
How are you handling the front doors when they become ADA accessible?
Good question, yeah. So the front doors, currently each individual leaf is too narrow to meet accessibility requirements. So our proposed solution is to put an automatic operator on both leaves. They'll open them synchronously, so that that would provide the required width to enter into the building.
You have to do a lot of seismic work on the building.
Most of the seismic work has been done as part of the conversion of the building to a commercial use. There's a lot of work done starting in 2002 that I think carried on for a year or so. So our work is mostly around like where we're introducing a new elevator, for instance. So there's new penetrations, new work that we're proposing. It's gonna have some structural implications, but most of the seismic work's been completed.
So I hear that they closed it abruptly in '99, declared it unsafe. What was the reason?
You know, done a lot of digging into previous project records. That's not entirely clear. So I don't want, I can't speak to it on the record. But
If that comment triggered anything, you know, would.
it did go through, you know, that was obviously well before our time of involvement in the project. It did go through permitting with the city and did receive new certificates of occupancy for those new uses. So I'm assuming those concerns were resolved.
I remember with seismic issues.
I think that's probably right. Yeah.
So I was on the school board at the time when we closed it, and it was just concerned because it was a school building and the safety for the kids seismically, fire concerns and that sort of thing. And it just didn't accommodate the beyond the safety is just it did not accommodate the needs of the staff and students. And since we had already passed a bond for construction of construction of Lewis and Clark and at Columbia City. So all those kids were hauled out to portables at Columbia City so that they could get the building done. But it was, I think, mainly seismic and fire concerns. We shut her down.
The fire escapes you're taking off, are they community back?
No, they're not, to our interpretation, necessary by code.
What's construction would start? How long? How many years till you finish?
Less than one is the ideal.
Someone,
Yeah, but about a year, I would say, from the start of construction.
yeah, they plan on 2 and make.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like you're familiar with it.
Commissioners are planning on being in first of 24.
Are there any findings that we could make
High school is.
on that
I know that until 25.
ramp access point, the final half-inch? Any findings that we can make in this hearing that would help the argument that it's code compliant?
I guess maybe would you mind rephrasing the question?
I don't know if there's an option during rehabilitation of a historic building. You know, this building was, things have changed and this building is attempting to accommodate a use for the public, including wheelchair access. And it is a half an inch, and just wondering if there's some flexibility in that standard in this type of situation where there's a specific finding be made by the government entity.
Oh, I see.
Approving the.
We made that finding years ago when it was determined to be a designated landmark. So when the building official says, hey, is this an historic resource or not? Then I say, well, blah, 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 blah. And that gives them the tools to fudge.
Well, I don't know if I don't want to describe it as a fudge. I'd like to describe it as legal compliance within the legal standards under the 6U, under the.
Yeah, that's what it is. I'm using informal terminology. That's what it would be.
My
Right, and
intention,
do we need to reaffirm that in the course of this hearing, or is it sufficient that it was done previously?
Well, I mean, it's an official resource, and this is not a legislative hearing to make it. It's quasi judicial. You could feel warm and fuzzy. It certainly wouldn't hurt.
Well, I think it's a wonderful project. There's a lot of challenges, and I think it's great that they could accommodate this, and I'm persuaded that every attempt has been made to fully comply, and that the only reason that that they haven't been able to get that other half inch is just because of the challenges. And so if we can make a finding, we don't have to, that's fine, or former finding is fine as well. What I'm trying to do is protect. In the end, in case some folks have some trouble accessing this, hopefully they won't. That it was done lawfully, and that could be used as a defense to any legal action that's brought.
My objection back, the first one was architecturally. And I wanted to see it come down to the side. And it would be, I just was looking at your plan there. If you come off the sidewalk, come off. You would have, get to reception, you'll have 100 less feet to roll. You'll have to deal with 5 less turns. And it just seems a lot simpler. It isn't messing with the facade of the building at all in the front. That was my objection. Then it is now. I think Jenny told me that they couldn't come into the reception right away. But you certainly can. There's a pair of doors coming in the front, there's a pair of doors coming into the back of the reception.
So this is the east,
The site plan up, is this what you're looking at, Russ?
I'm on 4.1.
Yeah, point.
That's it.
Or,
Those doors open in.
at the side. All the exterior doors open to the outside.
Or can I ask a question, Russ? So if your architectural alternative that you're proposing, do the people still enter through the front door?
no, they enter through the common hallway at the back.
Yeah, I think we're better off giving up a half an inch and letting folks come up through the front door. That's what, I mean.
Yeah, I think, I do think that, I do think that the accessibility requirements for this project will obligate us to provide accessible means of entry to the primary door into the building. But operationally, I think also just to control visitors into the building from a security standpoint, I think it's important that all guests arrive at the building at a single point of entry.
Eventually they go to medical detectors, sometimes you go to a lot of county buildings.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately, but in other places there.
You can see the front door is kind of, there's a vestibule, there's a second set of doors at the inside of the building that provides that level of security and access control. The side doors are likely to be exit only in their final configuration, just to control use.
There's a conflict with the staircase there on the east side too, it'd be hard to
It'd be tricky.
get
You'd
it.
be already up at that elevation.
You're getting the 2 stairs, top of the stairs, it's not a flat landing.
Yeah, I think there'd have to be significant alteration to the stairs and top landing of the stairs to the east.
Let's opportunity to ask some questions.
Yeah. Yes.
The guardrail.
Mhm.
Is that steel? The guardrail?
It'll be, yeah, exactly, painted steel.
Intent. What then with the building or what are?
Yeah, our goal was, yeah, exactly, to paint it consistent with the exterior palette of the building. As Jacob mentioned, we didn't specify a specific color or match, to a match to the cornice color or to the typical building color, for instance, in our application. We're open to any thoughts that you have. I think either of those scenarios seems.
Can the louvers also be painted to match the
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
building? My recommendation that we want the louvers just to disappear.
Yes, agreed.
So, none of the rock walls are going to be affected by anything you're doing.
The retaining walls around the correct.
Yeah.
Are they, were they really?
So,
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think I share Commissioner Toski's concerns about the generator building because the play shed currently, it almost looks like T111, I think T111 is terrible. So I'd like some clarification on what
That's true.
you're thinking there, because I would hate to see, my reasoning is because most people I think are gonna park in a city parking lot, and that shed is almost the first thing people are gonna see once they get out of their cars.
Yeah, so to clarify, I mentioned that the cladding would match the play shed or the original playground structure. That building does have a mix of siding materials, including some original siding, what we believe is likely original wood siding, and then a mix of various widths of T111 plywood siding. We're proposing 8-inch lap through wood siding that would match, no T111, it would match the original siding, or what we believe to be the original.
Drawing of the materials looks similar to T111, so I was.
Oh, sorry, yeah, just because of that section. No, yeah, thanks for clarifying it. We agree. No T111.
It does say on the cover page, cover sheet, that sheet 7.7, proposed trash / generator enclosure. But then on 7.7, says trash mechanical. So is that intended to demonstrate both enclosures?
That detail would apply to both enclosures. Detail 3, plan 1 and elevation 2 are specific to the enclosure that is attached to the building.
My other question would be for Jacob, was that mural approved? Did it not need to be approved by our commission?
So I would ask.
I remember them talking to us about it and thinking about that.
Are you gonna see half of it with the? 59 feet went away. I mean.
And so because I'm trying to think, it's been a little while, because the building itself, the playground building is not a historic resource. And in the architectural standards, it specifically says that painting is not a change.
What does that mean?
That it wasn't subject to review. In fact, I can give you the exact terminology, so I'm not just.
Does that mean we could say can be changed?
I think it's fair game.
I move that
So was the,
they have permission to change it.
was the painting person or city project?
I believe so. There was a woman who was trying to engage youth in art, and in addition to that, she also, they painted the bowls in the skateboard park. I'm not sure what the whole process was or how it came about, but I understand that was the connection to that. The woman might have been working through the rec program, I'm not sure, but in an attempt to engage youth in positive artistic endeavors.
So Jacob, you're saying that the play shed is outside of. I mean, I couldn't paint a mural on the side of my building if I wanted to, the way I understand it.
So
You
it's
Cannot. I believe I cannot paint. I'm thinking that I can't even paint the back of my building since it was never painted except for its graffiti now, but.
yeah, this is a good question. It's a good educational thing. So again, the play shed is not a designated landmark. And so then it falls under the architectural guidelines of the Riverfront District. And the exceptions for changes, permanent exterior architectural changes, which would normally require a review, a recommendation by the Historic Landmarks Commission. One of the exceptions is painting of buildings except when painting previously unpainted masonry or stone. So it was painted prior and it wasn't a sign because it's not conveying a commercial message. And so it's one of those tricky ones, because if it was a sign, then it would technically go to you. But because it's not a commercial message in art, there was no key path to bring it to this group.
Is there any rules about removal of public art?
Yeah, that's my question.
Start calling it graffiti.
That's true. I'm sure you have to, I mean, is there a
And then you remove
process?
it.
That's the point.
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, if the county, I think you could recommend its removal. You know, some people could argue freedom of speech and stuff like that. It's one of those, you know, good question, and I think if your recommendation was to remove it, If the county's receptive to it, then great, it's easy. If they're not, we'll have to see what happens.
I think we have to look somewhat into the future because especially with this generator enclosure building, you're gonna drive up, you're gonna park in the city parking. Behind the play shed is adjacent city property. It used to be part of another historic, not a designated landmark, but a historic house there, the Hatton House. All that was part of that. Historically, those were beautiful gardens and things, and I don't know if the city has plans to do anything with that, but here we are and we're popping up sided blocks. I don't know, I kind of like to see something more specific on the generator as part of the application.
I agree with Commissioner Pugsley on that I walk through there, so that's a sidewalk that actually goes up into the Second Street area, and then it goes up into a whole nother neighborhood. See, actually, there is areas that people walk through there, and so it's not exactly in the back of a parking lot somewhere. And we are adding a new building in a historic area, and so this is an opportunity, I think, for the architects to design, although it is an enclosure for a generator, nevertheless, I think it does add a challenge to have something other than, like, say, a cinder block
Does it
or
have a roof on it? Is it
No.
just?
So,
yeah.
so could it, so if it's similar to figure 2, 7x7. Just a wall, so a fence,
Correct.
really a tall
It's
fence.
just it's just a tall fence, yeah.
So could, now it would take a little more creativity, could it be shaped, maybe turned sideways and shaped like the roof of this playground structure? Shaped like meant to be there, not just something stuck on the side of it. Sorry, matching the curvature.
Potentially, yeah, we're quite constrained by, there's very limited, in order to not impact the more formal landscape around the building that meet the city's parking requirements. We've been hard pressed to find every available on-site parking space that we can. So on sheet 4.1, if we could go back to the site plan. You can see how the generator enclosure is set back from that play shed in order to accommodate those extra 2 parking spaces.
Parking where this lawn now, I see.
Right. If we rotated it, I think we'd lose those spaces. We also proposed buffering planting at the south property edge just to screen that generator from the adjacent residential property, which we made a value judgment. We thought that was better use of the space rather than pushing the generator to align with the building corner, although I could see an argument for the alternative, to carry that line through.
It doesn't look like it, but do you think there's any room for more plantings to buffer the?
Potentially. Yeah, potentially. I think we could look into, I think we could look into whether we could add some planting against Second Street there
So
to screen it.
even if it is the end point of the generator, there's all that curving look matches the design, I would think. It'd be that hard.
Potentially, yeah. I have to probably go back and refresh my memory of required clearances around generators. If they need to be on all frontages or whether we could build right up to the generator. But I think we may have some flexibility in the range of feet. And yeah. Would that be an acceptable improvement, something to address that frontage on Second?
Yeah, we're really, I can tell you this, the project is very impressive. The building is gonna be significantly improved. And let's just not miss an opportunity to make sure we've done our best with this other structure, that we don't just slap something up and everything go, what is this thing? It's something I'm trying to avoid.
The way it's situated, the back, the sides of the building, I mean, it's not just a front that people see, it's really, needs to be a showplace as much as possible, the entire.
Right. Incorporate as much added topics that.
We're morphing into a lot of discussion here, we're. silent look at here today, but
Yeah.
did need to be something we needed to talk to you about. So you could give us some input on choices, so.
Is that sign you were talking about, the one on the front picture? Replacing that one?
Yes, it's like wood.
Yeah.
Correct.
And that's what you're doing, a wood one?
No, it's gonna be a powder coated metal is currently proposed. A detail that can be done on 7.3, I believe, is the sheet. Nope.
Building mounted one.
So it's proposed to have the building's name, address, the county seal, and indication of the departments within. And it would be a metal construction, painted metal construction.
That's gonna be big.
Yeah, we do have it dimensioned. 4'10", 6'6", which matches the limits of the zoning code for freestanding monument signage.
So she was at John Gum is, we did some research, we being the historical society, it's spelled wrong, but historically it's spelled wrong, so we're gonna.
I think it's,
It
I
needs to
noticed.
stay wrong.
Yeah, I think it's.
But it was only one M.
One M.
His name was only one M,
Yeah.
and so, but it's been spelled wrong for so many years, I think it's appropriate to keep it wrong.
It's gotta stay that way.
The misspelling itself is historically significant.
That's right. You're right.
That's fine. Any other questions of the applicants? Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Potentially have other people. So is anyone else in favor of the application for that? One, with neutral testimony. What are those, anyone opposed? All right. Well, any final questions of staff or the applicant?
Are we gonna be asked to make findings tonight?
Well, you will have the opportunity to make findings and decision if you feel comfortable doing so.
I do. But it doesn't sound like there's any particular findings to make regarding this ramp at this time tonight.
Yeah, I think as far as how what the building code will allow, the designation that the building has already takes care of that.
You want me to just rattle off some motions?
No seconds, Nope, having no further questions for the commission, no further responses from staff, the public record is closed. This matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral decision. Discussion.
And my only thought is I'd like to see the louvers painted the same, required to be painted the same as the building, and any of those type of features to make that go away. Handrails.
Staff talked about the sign not being so large that it obscures the architectural features of the building, but that with that lower darker part, it's pretty tall.
Yeah.
So a 5-foot sign wouldn't be obscuring too much of the street, looks like to me, if you look at the front page.
Is the new sign gonna be same location as the old sign?
I think we put it on the opposite side, as I recall, to avoid some tree root zones that we thought we might want to avoid. So it's symmetrically located, but similar.
Staff's recommendations. If you want. Or
You want that added in then, Jennifer? Is there a word added in? the motion?
We have it kind of suggested as
I see it.
condition 5.
Yeah,
So you would just, if that's, you would recommend as recommended by staff with the following changes or additions.
yeah, is there any other addition?
I think that a lot of us had some concerns about the emergency generator enclosure. But,
Yeah, and so,
getting into the playground structure design a little better.
sorry to interject. So we have 2 decisions to make. One is specific to the historic resource review, and that's the building itself.
Okay.
So let's tackle that. And then the architectural standard recommendation, that is the emergency generator enclosure and the freestanding sign.
I see, yeah.
Jacob, could you discuss the archival print question a little more?
Oh, yeah, sure. So there's a section in the code that says prior to alteration, current photographs and or drawings of all elevations shall be provided to the city for its public records. Photographs and drawings shall be archival quality. Proof of such shall be provided with the photographs and or drawings. And in the past, we've said, well, we have digital photos and all the other stuff. And that was fine. But this is a pretty big deal. And so there was just a thought of, I don't know if this is archival quality paper or an archival quality print. And, you wouldn't necessarily put all these plans on that. It would just be, here is this building at this place in time. And so then you have the record, 50, 100 years from now, there's probably interest in how it has evolved. And this would be one of those episodes of evolution.
There's acid-free paper.
Right, yeah.
Wow, yeah.
Be Mylar, wouldn't it? Yes,
I'd like to see that.
Yeah, that's, that's specific for the surveyor for the clerk's office. Honestly, I don't have a lot of experience with archival quality materials, so I can't personally attest to that. It's just a matter of, do you want to up the ante beyond what we have now?
No, I don't. What year was that written, the archival print? What year was that?
That was, you can thank Al Peterson for that. So it was, I don't know, 8 years ago, 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
So as far as the Museum Association and Historical Society, we're digitizing everything we possibly can, so.
Right.
I suppose that's.
Yeah, that was,
But I mean, so I guess I move that the current prints are of archival quality.
yeah, I mean, if you're cool with what we have, then don't sweat it. Just the paint to match louvers, handrails.
All handrails are going to be steel.
Rails and those little non-historic light fixtures, wall packs. Blend into the wall.
Color or the dark.
Those need to be added then.
Yeah, the wall packs are not specifically identified in condition 5, so easy addition.
I think the wall packs are you're just gonna look at it and see that it's lit and it's just gonna disappear. Like,
Which was painted on the outside of it. Yeah. You draw attention to the historic features better. I think they should be archival stone. Digital stuff could be corrupted. It's not really better. Usually, but that can burn too, so.
If you have a burning bush nearby, we can.
All right, so that's the first portion. We have a motion to accept the staff's recommendations
We're
with,
gonna make a motion, Steve.
with the,
Well, I kind of want to bump through some of these red. Staff report pages on some of the things that we can make some findings. Maybe we should.
how about color?
That the applicant proposing a new accessible ramp to the main entry to the building to require removal of a portion of front entry porch. Eliminate the word small. Portion of the front entry porch, which will not be visible from the front. Although the front entry porch is clearly a distinct feature, I would propose the commission finds that the alteration of distinct feature is consistent with the goal of preserving the property and at the same time providing the access to handicap folks. That's my proposal. Because we're trying to essentially remove stone and continue with this amazing facade that was built more than 100 years ago. And the county's done a very good job of accomplishing both things. And that we need to, I think it's important to make a finding that the porch has been removed. It's part of the historical feature. I don't think it's a small portion, but I think it's enough to serve the purpose of the access.
I certainly think it's the least intrusive, and you're not gonna see it from the portion that they're removing is behind that pillar.
Right.
So
I don't want to say it's a small portion. Yeah, removing actually the wall area that people would have to climb over. It's the larger portion. I think it's necessary to remove a larger portion. And continue to remove even more portions may cause other issues as far as structural integrity and other issues with access to the building.
It's minimal in terms of the facade of the look at it. Can't even be seen except when you're right on the porch looking sideways. That's pretty minimal.
Right.
And it's not structural. So it's not more than minimal.
Well, I guess my question would be, why not just make it another half an inch wider?
Because it,
because then if you saw the site, you're trying to save that pillar.
yeah.
So I think we need to make
It would be
a
structural.
So I think we need to make a finding that they've done everything reasonably possible to maintain the historic feature of the pillar and the entrance to this building in altering this historic portion in order to have access there. And while it may fall a half an inch short, we find that everything reasonably been done fully compliant. And that if there is flexibility within the ADA law, we believe that the facts of this the facts of this design should fit the criteria of the flexibility, because indeed it is a historic structure. Indeed, they are removing stonework. Indeed, we are trying to make access accessible,
Not stone.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
What
There's
I'm
some
being told is
confusion. This is a historic landmark review, though. This is, I mean, can't we simplify it that as they present it? Instead of,
I mean, you can simply find that criterion D, historic character of the property shall be retained and preserved, the removal or relocation of distinctive features, or alterations of features, spaces, and spatial relationships that characterize the property shall be avoided. And so you can simply say, because of where it's at, criterion D is met. And this really illustrates it well. You can see the shading of the part that is proposed to be removed.
just having been involved in some ADA litigation in the past, I'm just trying to do what we can. And, one question is, why don't we just make it a half an inch wider? Well, we've been given very good reasons why that is. And I think we as planners should say we're satisfied with that.
So looking at that picture, the base of those columns, they don't mess with that. The feature, the vertical feature on the wall matches the vertical feature by the little farther towards the door too. See, so it's the same width there as it is back there. We're not cutting anything there. We would change the design of the facade of the building to cut that back. You might not want to take out the base of the column for structural reasons. So I think they did the maximum they could in the middle spot.
I second that. And I'd like to get a vote on that.
How wide is that actually?
It's 35.5 inches when it's gonna be finished. And the code is 36.
And they put little bumpers on those edges as because they're not smooth. The wheelchair get bump into those corners.
Potentially, as long as we wouldn't want to reduce the clearance.
No. Little thin, those little thin plastic.
Yeah, to be honest, I think when we're in construction, we will explore whether, that's a rough field measurement and it's down to the half of an inch.
You can just round them off.
I think
Seriously.
I think this is something that probably is gonna be completely resolved in construction, to be honest, just because it's an existing configuration we're altering. I'm confident in our approach that it either will meet the the letter of the accessibility requirements, or will meet the intent to the extent possible.
I second Dan's statement that we've done everything possible to make it compliant with all of his statements. I just say we adopt those as our findings in this hearing in the event our record ever needs to be reviewed. Can I get a second?
second that.
Favor?
Like,
Aye.
Aye. I mean,
I've seen it where these folks come out with a measuring tape and they just put it right there, and then next thing you know, there's a lawsuit.
Is there any other things in the red? Sort of some deep color. Building color for the louvers.
they should match.
And the discussion was the louvers, the guardrails, handrails, picket tube posts, and the wall packs. And that was to paint them so they're the same color as the building. Is that kind of what you were?
Here,
I think the ramp handrail falls mostly in the dark part. That's
yeah, it seems like last time we talked about it being painted in the lower dark part.
And Anything to match building, that's
Yep.
good guidance.
To the-
Okay, so do we have a motion to accept the staff recommendations?
With additions added,
Little additions added,
with the, some of,
that's it. And all in favor? Russ?
Aye.
We can hear Russ. We think that. Thank you.
And then,
the second portion of this,
Yes, so this
so
is,
let's get a motion for signature on that, just so that's all buttoned up.
yeah, so many.
second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Who's gonna remind?
Aye.
Bisexual.
All right, so then the virtual design part, that's just the proposed freestanding sign and the emergency generator enclosure. This is a recommendation to the approval authority, which is staff.
I don't have any problems with the sign as proposed.
We do have some issues with the generator enclosure,
Yes.
fitting into the architecture of the playground structure, is that correct? With exterior finishes, lighting and even shape.
It's pretty fence-like, so if it was, I could live with it even if it had some kind of plant screening, but big half-wall fence plopped there, it's just in a prominent location, so the place yet is a mishmash of sightings.
You say that the sightings of the playground thing would be all made to be the same at some point?
Well, they're not, they're not.
Would have to be remodeled,
And that's not part of the scope of the project.
no.
And chances are it'll go over budget, they'll be looking to cut things, so.
Yeah.
The way projects go.
So how will the generator enclosure match that facade? It seems to be T111. T111, so. Something like that. So.
Can we ask another question of the applicant on it?
Sure, yeah, I mean, the public hearing is basically over, so we can go back to anarchy.
Because this is not part of the list.
Yeah, this is just a recommendation to staff, so,
The staff.
yeah, so
So what
Don't
is,
disappoint us.
yeah, so if you wanna.
Don't blow it.
Yeah, you're trying to-
Do good.
I'm back.
could you please state again,
Yes,
the siding material is gonna be, is it tongue and groove, is it?
it's proposed to be lap siding, so essentially tongue groove. It doesn't have one of the tongues, right, so it laps. But just wood siding, that is normally 8 inches wide, which is our measurement of the width of the existing original siding that remains on the playground structure.
On that side.
You know, to be honest, I'm more familiar with the other side, ironically.
It's really
I
different.
can't speak to that side specifically. You can actually, I'm sorry to point again, you can see some of that here for us.
Oh, at the top, yeah.
Particular, that's what I measured.
Really like a double siding or anything, it's just. I just like, if there's room to put some kind of planting screening in front of it.
We know how we feel about it. Let them go back to the drawing board, let the architects come up with something. Bring it back, show us.
If you wonder how much rock is there too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, do you think you're gonna grow?
That's exactly how.
Yeah,
Yeah, about that.
We need dynamite to plant it
Yeah,
out.
I think so. As a paper out there, and come up with something that looks good.
But you're just liking to state that we have concerns about it and that to take a second look at it.
Yeah. That's enough information for you?
Yeah, so you're satisfied with the sign, the generating enclosure, you're just
Nothing T111 like.
you're not prepared to give a recommendation on that, is that?
Make it look good. I mean, come on, there's a lot of people that come down here and this is an area that people walk by and they park and, you know, this is an opportunity. It's an outbuilding, it screens, but at the same time, this is where we have, you know, our tourism come in and, you know, right, let's not make this into something that looks like a shed. Right, it's next to this huge historical building.
I personally like the piece of art. It's not historic, but it's something to look at when you drive up there. Look at it later. So,
Yeah, it's definitely gonna be impacted visually by it. So is your recommendation simply to give it, ensure that it has good visual interest?
yeah.
That's kind of where you're,
That fits in historically into the historical nature and make it fit in and
How long has it been there?
Yeah, I mean, people shouldn't try to figure out, oh, this looks like a brand new thing stuck on this old building. It's like a trash enclosure.
but they could say it looks nice, it fits in.
I think there's pictures of that whole front side being open at one point. It wasn't closed.
Right.
Garage doors and all that.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
At one time, we have photographs of kids playing in there with.
Yeah.
Trying to avoid something go there that people want to put graffiti on.
yeah, that's always a. Well, we get the lighting.
Okay. Yeah,
So that is your recommendation, or?
yes. The final written decision of the planning commission. The appeal to the city is for the previous one. The appeal to the city council, the notice of decision will be mailed to all persons who testify or submitted comments, and appeal deadline will be included in the notice. That's for the previous actual hearing.
Thank you.
Take your time, everyone.
Discussion item. Location.
Okay, this is not a public hearing. So we don't have the formalities of all that stuff that we talk about. This is a right-of-way vacation. It's a decision by the city council. And pretty much from this, from a couple months ago forth, given the planning commission's desire to be included, we'll give you all of these to look at before it goes to the council. This one's interesting in that we have this situation where, so you can see the homes just to the right of the red shading. The red shading is the proposed right-of-way area to be vacated. And it's half, 40 feet of the 80 feet wide right-of-way. And it's essentially along 4 city lots. There's 2 houses there, but each house is straddling 2 lots. So that's where the dimension comes from, half of the right-of-way width, and then 4 58 lots times 4. Yeah, 58 wide lots times 4. And what's kind of interesting about this site, so even though it's these properties came up before because the addressing is weird. For some reason, they have a 9th Street address, even though 9th Street there does not provide access at all. If we could go back in time, you know, I'm the person that gets to deal with addressing now. I would have assigned it an 8th Street address because that's where access comes from. But, you know, that was done a long time ago. It is what it is. But you see this kind of shared drive in that photo. You see a water line going down there. That provides access to those lots. The significance of that is 9th Street is not developed. And so these people saw that, they talked to us, like, well, we want to try to see if we can include that as part of our property. And there's 2 neighbors working together on this, as you can see those 2 houses. And so we have to consider whether or not the public interest will be prejudiced. You know, will the public interest be preserved? And we can throw out needing a street through there. To the north, you have a bluff. Some of you may remember the vacation proposed by Rick Scholl and Ron Schlumberger a few years ago now. And that is just right outside the screen. So there's a cliff there. No standard vehicle is going to make it. And then there's kind of a wetline complex and stuff generally to the south. So we don't see the street going through. But rights of way do have purposes other than streets, utilities and things like that. So we looked at this, and first of all, let's talk about our comments from our engineering staff. So engineering staff, you know, observed a natural drainage going through there, which was kind of a concern of theirs. And then also the potential of utility extensions. You can see that the water line kind of centered, perpendicular and centered to the area to be vacated. And if development were to occur, or further development just to the west of that, there's potential to extend the line. And the more private property you have, the more area you need for easements. And then also, you would need utility easement for the orange line, which is storm, and then the green one, which is sanitary sewer, there on the south side. So those were some issues that give our engineering department some concern about granting the vacation. The other thing that we kind of looked at was fire access. So nowadays, if we had this kind of proposal, let's pretend that all these lots were vacant, we'd go, all right, well, you're proposing a home on an access that's greater than 115 feet in length, and that requires a turnaround suitable to the fire code. Or the alternative is to add a sprinkler system or something like that. And a lot of times people try to avoid those because of cost and such. And so when we're kind of thinking about that, the right of way can be a shared space. If vacated, it's not necessarily a shared space. Folks would have to cooperate to get easements and stuff. And so there was concern about vacating it and losing that future potential of fire access. And this is, with vacations, it's hard to digest everything when you're talking to someone at the beginning. And, it's certainly not a good feeling when, they put work into it and we're like, gosh, we don't know about this. There is concern. If you read the report, you can see that there's not a recommendation of approval. Of course, you can disagree and the council can disagree as well. We just have to propose or talk about those areas that are of concern. So since this is not a public hearing, we can handle this however you want. I believe the people involved are here to discuss the matter, and I know you've been talking with Jenny, and she's like, like I said, she wasn't able to be here, so you get to deal with me. I reckon they would want to talk about it to help you with your recommendation. But we'll start with any questions, any more questions for me, and then we can go to talking to the folks out there.
Left of the vacation are those buildable lots? They look like they would be.
Canyon, isn't it?
There's a lot of wetlands in there.
Is that what it is?
Isn't that your property, Steve?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a larger residential property. Because of its size, you know, there's potential redevelopment proposal. I don't think Steve wants to do that, but
I've got 14 lots in there. It's almost 2 acres.
I remembered your name too.
What I will say is that a few years ago, I was gonna have the city come in and clean out the culvert that goes down the orange shaded orange area.
No.
And it was, if you look up in the left-hand corner, you'll see an apartment complex there. The stormwater used to dump right out onto my property. It was like a 20-inch culvert. And when we got rain like we just had, my property would turn into a lake, literally. And since they put the stormwater in and tied it into the other stormwater that's running across there, it took care of half of the water out of there. And I do have one other creek that comes down the canyon. You can't see it there, but somebody had called it, well, the old word for the creek. And so that creek's still alive, and you know, it dries up in the summertime. But the other culvert that was there, since they ran the storm water and tied it in, that culvert ditch is dry. There's no water in it. So if anybody's worried about wetlands there in the proposed vacated area, it's not there. So just to prove that, you'd probably have to run another test site.
On the West Street drainage now.
What's that?
On the West Street drainage now,
Okay.
because I have property downstream from that, and I know what the name was.
Yes, you do.
Untitled. Yeah,
I remember.
it was not, it's not a very good word.
So some of you who have been here with us for several years may remember Steve. He was one of the active citizens for the earth removal case. So if you remember the bluff, you know, he was kind of on that south east side of it. That's why I remember your name, because
Your mountain.
that was quite the case.
Yes.
I should point out on that diagram, so the red part is the area to be vacated. You'll see a smaller rectangular shape and a circular shape with shading. Those are two of the fire apparatus turnaround dimensions. So you can kind of see what that looks like as it relates to the vacated area.
I say something about the turnaround
Sure. Yeah.
on Murphy.
As long as.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's informal. It's informal right now, sure. So,
Okay.
where is your home?
Route 144, we're on see the blue roof there, that's ours.
At 144 7th Street.
Yeah, we're in a non-existent 9th Street address.
Yeah.
Anyway, our access is access off of 8th Street. It's 18 feet wide. It's a private drive, and there are no other accesses down to it. When you get down to the orange area, turning around is almost impossible. There are very little area to turn around in. And what we're trying to do is just increase our parking area. We're not looking at building structures. We're just trying to get it so we can increase the parking area and use it. I have pictures of the culvert that's in question that was taken days ago, right after we hit our 2 inches of rain, totally dry. The culvert is being used by a skunk for a home right now. Yeah. Yes. Anyway, so it's, that's the only real access to the place. If it was for fire, if it was raining, there's no other way to get through because it's all soft ground. So that's the only access. And if fire trucks want to go down there, there's no way they can turn around. It is tight. What we're trying to do is propose so we can extend that a little bit. I doubt seriously if the city will ever build 9th Street between the two bluffs. And like I said, one area up on the north has already been vacation, so there's only half of it left on that street. And if it's a question of access, we can't maintain access until, right away. We have a sewer right away and a water right away right there, so we know right of ways.
And as a property owner on a partial of the abutting property, I would oppose that turnaround. You're cutting into my property on that. To your plan.
Yeah, the circular driveway, it's because the radius is slightly larger than 80 feet.
Yeah, isn't that like 160 or 200 foot radius? I don't remember.
Yeah, it's not that huge.
Has to be big enough for a fire truck to turn around.
Yeah, 96 sounds right, but that's why it was drawn a little bit onto the petitioner's property. So it didn't encroach into a neighboring property. Because it is an 80-foot swath, and the orange is half of that.
So the drawing is right at the line of the right of way, not on your property. The right of way is right there.
And the challenge with vacations is, we always think into the future. Because once you give up right of way, it's harder to get back. You have to condemn, adversely possess, stuff like that. So whether or not you give it up, it's important. And looking into the future, 50, 100 years, that's always a challenge, but it's something that we have to do. And so that's why, we're considering things like turnarounds just for that far flung view, which may be beyond any of our lifetimes.
So I think it would be very difficult to develop this property. How would you get a full street into there anywhere? Because, well, won't be
And how about adding an ADU?
There's won't be a real boulevard right away is half bluff or more. This driveway starts in on it. It goes on to other lots, right, to get to the house. Yeah, right. You have some easements on the back of the lot on 8th Street.
So I did hear.
Isn't your driveway have an easement on the back of the lot of the last house on 8th Street? Get to your house because of the bluff.
The dog leg.
Dog leg can.
That map is not very good. May I approach the back?
Yeah. That's.
Yeah, it doesn't show the broader situation.
I've walked down there many times over the years.
This is my property here, this little piece here, and all the way down here. What you're talking about is,
Dog leg is in the city.
this is my road.
That's what I was talking about right there. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, number one, you would have to try and figure out what to do with this retaining wall in order to get a street wide enough for a two-way lane in there. It's just not there.
It's a historic structure.
This road was kind of grandfathered in. The house was built in 1920. So
There's no road into there.
there's no road.
Yep.
And I do not own these two lots here.
That's right.
Where Columbia becomes Willamette, down in that canyon, I guess it could come from 12th Street, but
If he passes that around, don't you need a copy?
It would be good to have, this isn't a public hearing, a little bit more informality.
I apologize for that.
I have no.
You are recommending to the council whether or not they should grant this right-of-way vacation.
Okay, so is there a reason why council didn't want us to hold the hearing?
It is not your authority to have the hearings, that's why it's simply a recommendation.
Because we think the planning, but why isn't the planning commission gonna hold a hearing as far as making its recommendations to the council?
It's not a formal hearing with the advertisement, but it's still, you know, your discussion for the recommendation.
But under the Keith Locke thing, we held a hearing, an evidentiary hearing, and we made formal findings and we made recommendations to the council. And then council either they had to overrule, that was the legal process there.
Yeah, but it wasn't a hearing with all the formal notifications and such. So it was similar to how it was advertised.
Sheila, they want it.
Thank you.
Okay, I disagree because I did receive notification of the hearing. The planning commission hearing, the Keith Locke thing. So I just have a question. Is this has an application been filed under ORS 271.080?
We do have an application, yeah.
Okay, and the reason for that application is the purpose of this vacation is for increased parking area for the petitioner's petition. That's what it says. Is that correct? I
they said,
That is what's
increased parking. Okay. All right. Should this vacation be granted, would there be an opportunity to build an additional structure on these lots?
Potential, it would increase the building envelope, assuming that you don't have blanket easements covering the whole thing.
So if the petition's granted, whether it be these owners or others, there'll be an opportunity for further development on these lands.
Yeah, because it'll increase the building footprint, so the property line's roughly here. And you have a yard, I guess that would be a side yard, or setback. And right now it's to the property line would move out, and so even if you did have a blanket easement on it, would increase the building envelope.
Okay.
So
I'm gonna take that as a yes from the planning department. And so, is it true that there is in the packet, it looks like there is an affected property labeled as affected property, labeled as an affected property without consent that has a common property line with one of the applicant's properties.
there is a corner. There is a corner. Here it is.
Can you put this one up?
Yeah, that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going. Here we go. Okay, so this is the area proposed to be vacated.
Which are the properties that are applicant properties?
The applicant property is here and here.
Okay.
And then the waffle pattern are those within the affected area and that have consent.
Got it. And then what about the one directly to your right there, the slash property?
This one is shown not to have consent.
Okay. And does the corner touch the area that's requested to be corner of the properties does it touch?
Because this property abuts this property, it is right there.
Oh, okay, and then, and so it seems to me also that the applicant's property where they're trying to vacate directly in front shares a common property boundary with a non-consenting property, correct?
Oh,
Instead of answer, then
They say no, but it looks like it right here on the map.
what were you gonna say?
The lady that owns that passed away. It's in probate and it's a 6 month to however long it is. She was very elderly. She got sick and we had consent, but she never had a chance to sign it. Grandson was taking care of her, and of course, the only signature would be hers. And she passed away about 2 weeks before we started doing this.
Sorry for that, and I'm sorry for the bad timing, okay, but we have but right now, as it stands, that property owner is not consented. And they have a common boundary line with the applicant property. And so.
Boundary's right there at the corner. If we were to do the vacation, there would be no common boundary on the vacation.
The common boundary line that I see is this one.
Correct.
And this one. That's a common boundary line between this property and this property. And then
The
this
vacation part would not have a common boundary.
Pardon? You're right, the vacation part wouldn't, but this parcel and this parcel. And there's also touches here. This corner also touches directly the area proposed to be vacated. So I think before, I'm happy to talk about the report of the engineering department. I think we should talk about that report. But I think before we get beyond that, we need to talk about whether the threshold requirement under 21 ORS 21.0802 has been met. It says there shall be appended to such petition as part thereof and as a basis for granting the same the consent of the owners of all abutting property. All abutting property. And under the St. Helens Municipal Code 17.16.010, words and used in this development code of their normal dictionary meaning, unless they are listed below. Words listed below have specific meaning stated, unless the context clearly indicates another meaning. The definition of words with specific meaning in the development code are as follows. Quote, abut/abutting, end quote, means adjacent, adjoining, or contiguous, to physically touch or border upon, or to share a common boundary line. So these two properties, they join, they're contiguous. They have an abutting property line and they touch. In addition, even if you want to just go strictly upon the area being vacated, the area being vacated appears to touch the non-consenting. And so, it would appear that under the St. Helens Municipal Code definition of abutting, that by not having the consent of that property owner, this application could not move forward at all as a matter of law. And then we get into questions like, are we being asked to ignore the St. Helens Municipal Code 17.16.010? Is there a contention that does not apply? I have not heard that contention.
Yeah, so when we checked this on the lot case, our own legal counsel tended to disagree with it abutting. But I think, you know, that concern can be expressed as part of your conclusion for the council. And then, you know,
It's not my concern. It's my concern as a planning commissioner that the law, the very letter of the law, and yet I guess my question to staff is, we did have this thing with council law, with the law thing. I came forward and I cited these laws. And I also cited the Burton, also hired Joel Grayson, who's the attorney for the Columbia County Board of Realtors. And he wrote a letter and went on the record with the city.
yeah, I understand
And
this.
well, let's make sure we understand, because I want these folks to understand that when it comes to legality and whether this can be legally done, I, as a planning commissioner, who am also an attorney, am very familiar with this law and what it says and what it means. And what I see is a law that says you have a budding property loan here and you don't have a consenting person. Now later, after this estate is settled, maybe they will consent and that'll be not part of the problem anymore. Right now it is. And so in addition to this St. Helens Municipal Code 17.16010, even if we're asked to ignore our own law, which there's not one reason given why we should, there are 3 cases that also state that this is an abutting situation and therefore could not go forward legally. One is a LUBA decision upholding that where 2 properties touch. And abut means to touch in the Webster dictionary. The LUBA decision upholding a decision denying a street vacancy. And there's 2 Oregon Supreme Court decisions. And so what I'm saying to staff is we have our municipal code. We have the fact that this could be developed later. We have a LUBA decision and we have 2 Supreme Court decisions that would say that this application should be denied because they physically touch, they border upon each other by our own law. And I'm wondering what the city attorney has, that we should ignore all of this and that we should side potentially illegally. Because you're asking it for us, what should we recommend the council? So do we have a single answer from the attorney for the city?
Like I said, they disagreed with it. They are our legal counsel. If the applicant wanted to be bulletproof from challenge, you know, they could get that consent before the official public hearing. Now, as far as the law case, it did not go to the council. And so the council, it's the legislative body, did not have an opportunity to rule on that. And so it's still kind of an open question as far as how we would tackle that locally.
Okay, so let's go back to the question. You said the attorney says they disagree. Any reason, because a disagreement is an opinion. I just want to know if they have a basis for it. Because right now I'm citing our code, I'm citing 2 Supreme Court cases and a LUBA decision. And I want to know if our attorney has something other than, gee, I disagree with that.
Yeah, and because I ended up taking this on unexpectedly, I didn't review my old notes.
Okay, so the basis then during the course of our discussion here, because I want to make sure, you know, my goal here is this, I got no dog in this hunt at all. I want to make sure that our decisions are lawful. I want to make the correct recommendations to council so that when we move forward with land use decisions, they're done by the law and according to the law. And so what we have here is a record, although an informal record, that the objecting property owner has an adjoining property line, the non-consenting property owner touches the part to be vacated, the non-consenting property owner is contiguous and meets all of the definitions of St. Helens Municipal Code 17.16010 as an abutting owner. And therefore, additionally, we have the Burton v. Sitter and City of Cameron Beach case, the Valenti v. Hopkins case, the Cook versus City of Portland case, and all of this can be made part of this record. And ORS 21-271.080 says that all abutting property owners must consent. So I don't see how we have that threshold requirement made.
Is the one property owner budding? Is that the one that's in probate?
Right, so I mean, after they get their estate.
Steve, after probate is over,
Right.
can this be dealt with then?
So without prejudice.
That's what he said.
They can come back and get that. There's still the issue that the engineering department has concerns, and there are other concerns that are a separate part of the decision-making process. But right now, on this petition, this property owner is not consenting. Now, later, once the estate sale, so it's settled, this can be eliminated in the future. But right now, on this record, we're being asked on this record, on this application, what is our recommendation to council and why? And my recommendation, well, I believe we should talk about this some more. Anybody has any questions? But I have some, feel very strongly that we should make a recommendation to the city council that it deny this application in part because it does not comply with ORS 271.080 and that all of the abutting property owners have not consented. Yes.
Do we have any other discussion besides Steve's?
Can I ask just Jacob, do you know if this was going to be put on
January 4th.
the upcoming agenda for council? I don't see that.
It says right there,
January 4th, I don't know if it's locked and loaded, I think.
Okay, so yeah, that agenda hasn't been set, so that can change. And I just figure out is the timing of this request of the essence for you, so that if it was brought before the council at a later date until the probate issue was settled, is that?
Well, I have some issues with that. So if properties sell in the meantime, then we've done our due diligence. We got the 66 2/3% of the signatures as we were requested to do. And it was no easy task hunting these people down. But so if it takes 6 months and then somebody else comes along and buys that property that's not approved, they didn't approve, somebody else sells, how's that gonna affect?
Yeah, that's
Grandfathered in?
that's the issue, is, when it's submitted, are the owners at that time,
Right.
at that point in time, consenting?
And I can tell you, I'm pretty familiar with this procedure. Once the thing's submitted, there's a certain amount of time to act on it. And there is no procedure to amend the petition. Once the petition is submitted, there's no procedure to amend it. And there's certain things that the council can be discretionary about. But if it doesn't meet the threshold requirement, no. Yeah.
Ask a question then. How were we allowed to put in the request if this is clearly against the law? We should have not been able to put in the request if that boundary showed there was not a consent form. So I'm not understanding.
So,
Yes.
I'll give you.
It's because for decades, this was not an issue. abutting was abutting along the line, not at a point. It was only on the last vacation where the point being constituting abutting for the purposes of an acceptable petition came into play. And as I was mentioning, that one was at this juncture with the planning commission. And they got pretty beat up at that hearing and decided not to pursue it with the city council. And so it hasn't been an issue where the city council was, oh yeah, we need to do this for sure. And so in a sense, you're kind of a victim at this long-standing practice and this new concept of abutting and how it affects these.
So in the future, in your situation, if someone comes in and has this abutting situation, then you would say, I cannot take this application, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, so the awkward part is when we checked with our legal counsel, they were like, we don't see the issue. But obviously that issue is a concern here. And you know, when one attorney says the one thing, it gets challenged, it goes to the courts. That's why we talk about, well, if you had it, you were bulletproof. And so you're kind of in the middle of that dance.
So we would just, can this be on hold and then possibly the neighbor will finish the probate? The thing is, if any property is sold and there's a new owner, we would still need to start the whole process again. Is that right?
Well, are you asking for a continuance?
She's asking Jacob a question.
Well,
Sorry,
this is a recommendation to the council.
Yeah,
The council can say, you know what? We disagree with the planning commission entirely. They could say, I'm just gonna make it up, that, you know, well, we'll vacate it if you can find Santa Claus and Sasquatch and bring them to this room. And then the council will be like, yeah, you know what, we don't buy that. And I'm just making something up silly because I don't wanna, you know, pollute the decision with an actual example. So, you know, they could still express these concerns, and if the commission as a whole, you've heard a concern from one particular commissioner, but if the commission as a whole says, you know what, yeah, this is an issue, we want to make sure that this is part of the recommendation, then we would bring that recommendation to council for their consideration. So the buck it doesn't necessarily stop here.
The city, we were on the schedule. We were on the schedule for the 4th, but now that will be removed, is that correct?
Well, that's up to you.
it could be.
I don't,
But
Doesn't make
we
any
haven't-
sense, does it?
we haven't sent a notice to the paper yet. So there would be an opportunity to postpone if you wish, but it's, you know, it's penciled in. We just haven't, you know, sent the official notice out and all that stuff.
Doesn't appear that would make any sense because there's a time period on this anyway. So if we were to postpone it and postpone it again or whatever, we need to time and manner.
Yeah, so there's certain land use decisions that are subject to a timeline. The normal timeline is 120 days. This is a right-of-way vacation, which is not subject to that.
So we could conceivably just put it on hold, is that correct? As long as the property owners remain the same and all the consent forms would still be correct, and we would wait until Briggs, the grandson, either takes property or that's taken care of, and we would get a signature from that property. Is that a possibility? Clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, you're before the planning commission right now. You're hearing from staff. And so there are procedures whereby you can request a continuance. And there are laws that that deal with those continuances and whether it's granted or not. And I don't hear you asking us for a continuance, and I'm not even sure if this is the type of hearing where we would entertain that. But what you may want to do is request, I'm not giving you advice.
No, I understand.
But we're having this is more of a formal, informal hearing, right? We're kind of talking like neighbors here a little bit, at least, you know, but there is a procedure where you can request a continuance. And whether you can then submit additional evidence, for example, the consent of that non-consenting owner during that time, that would be a question you need to bring up to the council.
So, but Jacob, if there's no timeline, what are you continuing? There's no continuance.
There's no continuance. This doesn't have to happen. There's nothing that says we have to do this.
Yeah.
This is something that
Fast
you
forward.
want to be included.
So we're-
Because in the past,
You.
in the past,
Thank you.
it was the
Thank you.
ones that were controversial, not all of them. But you know, at this point, we're giving them all to you. So this isn't mandated. This is just an aid for the council to make sure that there is a recommendation from the body to help them make their decision.
Historically, the planner could just administratively make that decision. And we
Which
just,
decision?
They take it to the city
You.
council.
you would, well, not administrative, but you would make the decision to recommend it to the council on your own.
Yes.
You didn't have to bring it to the planning commission. We just wanted to have some input into that. You agreed that you would take our input.
It makes sense for you to have it.
So we've done it a bunch of times where someone wanted to vacate 60 feet and we said maybe 15.
Council doesn't
And because of whatever reason, you know, and we took it to the city council and they agreed or they didn't or whatever. But
If you move that line in 5 feet, not over your.
That's an interesting question. I thought about that. This is my opinion. It's not the ruling of the planning commission. As a commissioner, I would be concerned with the St. Helens Municipal Code. Says abutting means adjoining or contiguous, physically touch, border upon, or share a common property line. So even though you move it in 1 inch, your properties never will share a common property line. There is another procedure, by the way, where the council could do this on its own. There's a different procedure under the ORS that you can go and apply to the council directly.
Yeah, that shouldn't be used for private property. That really is only appropriate for public spaces.
So the continuance will, what's that?
You would just say, you know what? We think we would just want to make sure we get that consent, so this issue just isn't an issue. You just let us know, and okay, well, we'll just hold off on the January meeting.
So just let your office know.
Yeah.
The other applicant is online and she has her hand raised, so I was gonna ask her. See if she can unmute here. Kylie, I'm trying to let you unmute, but I'm not sure if you're able to do that. Oh, she's still in my.
She needs to unmute herself.
She's muted, yeah.
Yeah, her mic doesn't work.
Can she unmute herself?
Okay, there it goes. She typed a message. I was trying to focus on too many things at once.
is she typing a message rather than speaking it?
Yeah, she, her question was, will that affect my part of the vacation of well, since my property is not abut? And because it's part of the same proposal, they're not two separate petitions, so it's all kind of tied in with the same technicalities.
One thing that, your name, Steve, that's what Steve brought up, that with the rain, it's dry now. I happen to be a wetland scientist, and I think it's still a possibility it's still wetland there. So that's another concern about vacating it.
Yeah.
I'm not a wetland scientist, and I'm not doubting that the rain did what they did.
That site being dug.
Anyway, there's things about field, has rained for months and months and months, and I won't go into that, but without a wetland delineation there, we don't know for sure if it's wetland or not. Historically, it's been wet. And that would be a concern of having a flooded parking area at some point, or you're sinking because it's built on wet stuff. So anyway.
For me, Commissioner Toski clearly demonstrated that haven't met the code, so, but beyond that, I have concerns about the vacation based on the engineer's report, so.
Me too.
Not be in favor of this vacation. No.
And I don't know what you've seen. Have you seen anything? I don't know what Jenny's, like the report.
We haven't seen anything. We haven't
Okay.
seen your reports. But I'm hearing that even if this property line were not an issue, that there are several other engineering issues and issues that might be a problem anyway. I'm concerned because we were told it was good to work with our neighbor and do this project. And if she had done this by herself, she might have been able to get this.
I don't think so. I think it relates to the whole.
And
You don't think that, it still would have been the issues with her area as
I think the engineering issues.
Yeah, there's some engineering concerns too with this that we haven't even started to talk about yet.
So Jacob, I know it wasn't your thing to bring. Do you know the locally significant wetlands are mapped in that area?
Yeah, I mean, I worked with Jenny on this, so I know there's none of those wetlands clearly in the immediate vicinity, at least in the area to be vacated.
Nothing mapped there. Okay.
Nothing mapped.
So that the local wetland inventory is a very broad brush kind of mapping of wetlands. There's not a wetland delineation of precise boundaries. But if it's mapped and determined to be locally significant, then it goes to a bunch of rules that the city has to apply to locally significant wetlands. But I was just curious to see if there was that kind of more general kind of mapping.
Yeah, this is right by wetland J3.
Okay.
Which I will always remember because of that stupid earth removal case.
Oh, yeah.
So if there were those wetlands, we would have talked about it in the report.
Yeah, okay, I'm sure.
Or I would have, if I would have saw that in reviewing the report and say, hey, Jenny, we need to make sure we talk about this.
It's the Willamette Street drainage, isn't it? Right. It wasn't the Willamette Street drainage.
Oh, yeah, there's.
Further to the south. Further to the south, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I'm ready to make some motions.
All right, let's move on with our night.
Okay, so I make a motion that the planning commission make a recommendation to the council to deny the petition for the Murphy Family Trust, Kylie Bettler. That's the subject of this hearing, because the consent of all of the owners of all abutting property has not been made. That's gonna be my first motion.
Second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have a
Hey,
rest there.
And then I really make a motion that the planning commission finds that St. Helens Municipal Code section 1716.010 applies to this application, because this land potentially could be used for development in the future. Additionally, that the planning commission finds that the reason why abutting apply in this particular case is because an adjacent property is adjacent, adjoining, and contiguous, does physically touch and border upon, and does share a common property line It's not only the applicant's property, but also a portion of the property sought to be vacated.
Isn't that what the motion just was made?
That's what I thought.
Well, we made a motion to deny it, and then,
Based on that all the budding properties did not.
correct, and then, and now, see, so one of the things that we have come across in the past is whether St. Helens municipal code should apply. And I believe that we should make a specific finding that it does apply. And because there are legal standards that we need to use to find a bud or a budding. How did we make that finding? We made the finding of bud and budding. Now we are making a judicial finding to the recommendation of the council that municipal code does apply. And the way that we are interpreting the municipal codes, it physically touches and borders upon. And that is actually something that was mentioned in one of these LUBA decisions, is the planning commission actually adopting its own code and applying its own code. And so it is an additional basis for the council to understand that we believe that this 17.16.010 applies. That came up at the last hearing that didn't get finished up. There was a discussion whether it should apply, and I think that we should tell the council, we're making a rule that it applies in this case. And that's one of the bases for our decision.
Still a recommendation, so they can read that definition.
Well, wait, let's get a vote.
You have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then I'm further gonna make a motion for recommendation to the city council that the application be denied due to the concerns raised by the city public works engineering department about the drainage. I'm gonna say that as well.
You have a second? You have a second?
Who seconded?
All in favor?
Aye.
Cool. Do you have a vote? Do you have a vote? Oh. All right, thank you. All right. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Just like to say one thing, you guys really need to get your ducks in a row, because we spent a lot of time and money on entity saying one thing, one saying the other thing, and it's really not cool.
You know what, I agree with you 100%, and let me tell you, I just want to let you know, as a citizen, this affected me. I came forward with a legal opinion from one of the top lawyers in the area, and I came forward with all of these arguments before, and the city had nothing in response, nothing. They didn't come forward with one law or anything else. So here, all this time has gone by. We have this issue coming right back before us, and I'm sorry that it had to happen in this way, because I think the city, I agree with you, the city should have seen that we have a serious problem regarding, we're ignoring our own law, we're ignoring Supreme Court law, we're ignoring LUBA decisions, we're ignoring our own definitions. We're proceeding forward like we did it before, just because that's how I used to do it. And there's not one, I did not see one thing from the city attorney that gave a single reason supporting the position, not one. So I agree with you. And I want to let you know, I apologize to you as well.
Oh, no, your fault.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's just we're in a, it's an interesting situation. Thank you.
And it was a large waste of your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any, the planning direction?
Thank you, council.
And, it was sent to us earlier by email. I had a question about.
The only addition I have is the builder walked for Comstock. Builder walk, they came to pick up any civil, they submitted some kind of preliminary civil plans. They wanted to make sure that those weren't engineering departments, so someone else couldn't use them. I talked to their planner. They came to withdraw all their grading permits and stuff, so apparently I didn't hear from them directly, but I did hear from their planner that they want.
Jacob, before we leave, Sheila and anything that these people, 40 feet wide, 232 feet long, where it allows them to build additional, they need to buy that.
Well,
It's
so
not a give you, or give me.
so when we look at the list of tasks, one of those is specific right-of-way policy in our code to resolve some of these issues. And this comes up, well, this has come up for years, whether or not it should be purchased. And if it's specified in our code, then we're not waffling over it, then then we know. So we should have specific local policy for right-of-way locations that works in conjunction with state law. But there's a lot of things that we want to do. It's just a matter of where you prioritize it, what other competing things there are, and that's and what kind of staff and capacity we have.
Well, I said this after the walk case, after another one. I really think you need to work on it. So Steve?
Yeah.
Say it.
Honestly, I think these citizens were correct, and I think that we need to up our game. It concerns me when we have statutory construction like this, that's obvious and it's like dictionary type stuff. And the lawyer, I don't know how the city's being advised or what happened. I can tell you, I was perfectly willing to hear an alternate argument that was cogently stated and based upon legal authority. I got none.
We heard that already.
I know. Well,
And it never really got, because it never went to the council.
Yeah, but you had another citizen come up. I'm telling you, your lawyer, he's wrong. And not only is he wrong, had the council was foolish enough to follow his legal advice, they were gonna lose the lawsuit. I mean, I got Supreme Court authority and, come on.
I think it's important that they knew about this issue though, because we just let them, we recommended they're okay. It wasn't abutting and those other folks made us think about it. It would, we want to make sure it's really clear and easy for them to do what they want to do, not something that's subject to conflict. And our attorney doesn't agree, somebody else's attorney might agree with him, then
Sure, yeah.
So anyway, I think it was still the right thing to do, whether or not it's right or not. Because that conflict is here.
Well, I think it's right on our record. On our record, it was the right thing.
So before you leave out the door, never to see you again. But this is your last meeting. And
Yeah.
Seeing
we'll make sure that
every one of you again sometime.
Tomorrow.
Like tomorrow.
but we're not quite done yet.
Jacob, on the Sand Island trees, you mentioned that big leaf maples, Douglas firs be replaced. I think they ought to look into something that would live better out there, because Doug fir is not gonna live in that sand.
Yeah.
And the reason the cottonwoods are there is because they love that environment. So if Andrew could get one of his team to come up with a better selection for what would grow out there.
I recommend Oregon ash, except that the ash borer is found in Oregon now. Maybe wipe out all the ash.
Well, to plant some, maybe they'll survive, right? If-
They'll survive on an island better, yeah.
Yeah, so I, that,
Cottonwood out there, just to
so
replace.
Russ, I
Go up on their own this
found that too. I mean, selection of the trees.
It's brittle,
There, that's all it's there.
brittle and break for you. Oregon ash is good. So it's proper appropriate.
Yeah, I can suggest it may be late, you know, it's Lower Columbia Engineering and Lower Columbia Engineering Eco. So I assume they have
Yeah.
the right people.
Not, well,
What are you talking about?
yeah, well, I still have a question that.
They cut down 35 trees on Ten Island.
Yeah, they proposed a plan that just said no trees would be harmed. They identified the trees within 20 feet of the proposed buildings. And then when we went out there in the inspection, the buildings were not quite located as proposed. There was a bunch of trees down and a big slash pile. And I was like, this doesn't look right.
Are the
And
stumps still there?
No, it's not still like.
And so we're like, this, so we denied the inspection.
The stumps are still there, they'll grow back up.
And talking to one of the worker bees out there, they told me that someone gave them an old plan.
It's like a Bailey kind of thing.
It's, you know,
Yeah.
trees, man, it happens.
Well, it's the old, you know, go ahead and get the job done and then beg for forgiveness. That's what we got.
That's right.
So are the stumps remain?
Yeah, there was, I mean, I don't know if they're there now, it's been several weeks since I've been out.
Tell them they can't take the stumps out, and no cottonwoods will come right back up, they'll be fine. But some ash trees out there versus diversity would be good.
I just thought that, you know, the firs, and they're not gonna last out there. So, I mean, Andrew's got all the team to come up with something for sure.
Yeah, yeah, we could recommend, and, you know, if they wanna swap out some different species, that's not, no big deal.
And then now, then my next, get your table back.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was, so I've known about that for a long time. But I didn't have the photo evidence of it.
Yeah.
So I've kind of been aware of it. And then I was just, you know, kind of keeping track of it, looking online, and then they had those pictures. I'm like, there it is.
What are we gonna do?
Send the sheriff out.
The council recommended
First table was given.
that it be looked into.
Oh, the council discussed it?
The council did discuss it.
With chairs.
Yeah, I just wanted to
Well, the
make sure it was
council-
out there.
The council directed staff to follow up.
I mean, Robin was pretty impressed by those tables. She thought they're very valuable, and the chairs.
No, that table, that's huge and it's solid.
They're expensive.
You don't replace that with this cheap furniture. You have this classic stuff that you would pay an arm and a leg for in an Amish store. That's a city asset that shouldn't be thrown away.
No, along with the historic doors in this building that were taken down and crap.
Yeah, maybe we could move it into the museum when we get to the museum, you know, a nice table that could have the museum pieces, people could still sit on it.
It should be in the public realm, but I saw it, posted it, whatever happens, happens.
But yeah,
The council,
recommend staff to. What steps have been taken.
can't hear you.
So I don't know what steps have been taken yet, but the council did direct staff to check out what, if anything, has been done yet.
Anything else?
Oh, one review time into the application for the public safety committee.
Oh,
What's the update on that whole fiasco?
yeah, so they submitted the preliminary land use package and I reviewed it and provided some comments. There were some assumptions made in the financing of it by a former employee, which were wrong. For example, population growth, they based the anticipated growth on the rate between 2000 and 2010 instead of the last decade, which overinflated the growth, and the growth was reflected in the anticipated revenue. And so I think now they're looking at potentially downsizing it. So instead of it being a public safety facility, it is simply a police station.
So, yeah, so John Walsh has been looking at different financial scenarios along with John Ellis. And so after they feel that they have enough information to present options to the council, they'll move ahead with those recommendations. But as Jacob said, the projections and information that was provided to the council contained several.
Are there any other locations being considered, or is this done deal down there?
That's not being discussed yet. Any change of
Should be
location.
discussed, I think. It should be discussed, because you're still in a wetlands, that's gonna cost so much money.
So
Flood zone.
Yeah.
Same, no,
No.
worse.
No. It's a building problem.
Well, and then there's a government grant for $3 million to raise the McNulty Bridge. Saw that go through.
Hmm?
Huh?
I don't know about that.
I'm done.
Tom, no, he wants to,
Crazy.
I'm done. Let's go.
he says a bunch of money's been a grant to raise the McNulty Bridge because it needs to be done in order to accommodate, I guess, the station, if I'm correct.
I read it. I just assumed that was part of raising that whole area why would you raise it? I don't know.
That has nothing to do about the floodplain. There's been discussion about it, and Rachel was working on something. But it's just, it's a bridge that eventually needs to be replaced.
I have a question. Since we're on this subject. Did the public safety facility have a jail or a holding facilities? No. There's a police station, some consideration having a jail or holding facility. Just some thoughts in that regard.
No, I don't think I was ever part of the discussion. And Russ, you were a part of that advisory committee, right?
I was shut down as soon as I brought up another location that was part of the original part. I was shut down by Matt Brown. He said, we're not gonna look at that property, which was the old PG site up there, or PUD site. We're not looking at that because there's a sewer line that runs through the property, and that would be so expensive. We could not take care of that sewer line through the center of the property. We're not gonna look at that. Here we have, how many hundreds of thousands we already spent on design? You know, how much we spent so far?
I don't have that figure in front of me on that.
Well, you should have these numbers, because I mean, that's big impact on this city with our taxes.
I understand that, Russ, and I'll look into that, but I don't have it in front of me.
Well,
The rumor on the Matt Brown thing is too, and this is a rumor, could be a St. Helens rumor, is there's some power plays that potentially were being made by our finance director that I don't know how much those were tied into government projects. I don't know. I know that there is a review currently of Mr. Brown's tenure here. And I'm just bringing up that as we re-examine some of his transactions and decisions, hear about a guy like Russ, who's really, frankly, pension money saving guy and a businessman, get shot down. And then we have this other thing in a floodplain being built. I do think that we need to look back I'm just putting it out there that
And I believe those things are being looked at right now by staff. The staff will be bringing that before the council. But at this point in time, as finances and all that are being looked at, the staff, John Walsh, administrator, working with our interim finance person, are trying to make sure that they have the facts, figures, that they can present the information to the council. The council's not able to make any decisions until we have that information.
And I will say this as a citizen of St. Helens and on the plan commission, that if there were mistakes and there are miscalculations, and they can be, we can make some adjustments to make sure that we get the facility we need at a good price. That's what we should do.
I believe that. I am sure that I would not have agreed to move ahead with certain things had I had different information.
Well, no,
So now that we're finding this out, we're going to be working on that information. Staff.
and I believe you're gonna do a good faith job, Patrick, and I have 100% confidence in you. And it's good that we have these discussions.
Jacob, I have a question about something completely different. Below Elk Meadows, little stream that comes down from the wetlands out of the gravel mining, the Morris Brothers, or not Morris Brothers, but the warehouse property. What recently happened there? It's all denuded.
Oh, okay, so that is, so it's an old landfill, and DEQ is still hammering the owner, and it's a DEQ project. So that was one of the more,
The DEQ was trying to isolate the waters from the pollutants that could be coming out of the ground. Is that why it was done? No.
well, it's solid waste, and it was something about excavating the remaining, or the amount of solid waste to DEQ satisfaction. And then they were gonna put some of that up in under the BPA easement. And there's probably some details that I forgot since the lot line adjustment I processed months and months ago where I talked about that. But they're still working on DEQ compliance, like they've been working on since before the current owner even owned it.
I thought that was all resolved, but
No, yeah, it keeps going. And I know when I was up there with DEQ and them, a couple of years ago now, there was a question whether or not that stream, was within the jurisdiction of DSL. I remember them talking about that specifically.
it was.
But it's not a sensitive land or wetland or riparian area. So as far as our local rules,
You need to follow the state rules. That's DEQ. Yeah. Well, this is actually on Elk Meadows property or on the?
yeah, that's,
Is it-
it is an open space tract that belongs to the Elk Ridge subdivision.
The driveway up to the private property is just barely on their property.
Yeah, Barrack Lane, that
Barrack.
driveway is an easement.
Oh, really? It's in Elk Meadows.
Yeah, so it's
Okay.
Elk Meadows, it's on the Elk Meadows property.
About our collective item.
We're-
Update.
We're done.
Can we talk about updates on?
Well, actually, according to the last meeting, it said recommendation is to bring forth information in January.
Yeah.
I just looked at that agenda item on it.
Oh, I mean, I had time, we've been talking about 3115 for months, and I finally had time to start thinking about it in November. And as a planner, well, where's the land at? What's the affected area? So I made some maps. I could talk about those now, or if you're getting late, we can talk about them later. But I did prepare them and I can show them to you, just as it's, 5 minutes.
Or do you want to bring it up with your new commissioners?
Or, yeah, if you wanna wait, it's just,
Is
cause
it
what,
gonna come up tomorrow? Cause there's gonna be a 3115 discussion tomorrow if it's only needed.
yeah, I mean, it could. It could,
I mean, I've seen the maps and you sent them to me.
yeah.
I asked for them, so. Let's email them to us and then we'll pick it up. Unless Dan, it's gonna be up to Dan.
I'd say one for your information item.
Yeah.
This is like a significant gavel for these two amazing women, and it's been an
Yes.
honor to work with you guys, and you do a great job for here, but we're gonna miss you.
You will be whole.
I second that.
Thank
You
you.
guys are,
Been around
don't be
forever.
strangers. You guys, thank you. Sheila, thank you, Audrey.
Our years of service.
You're
You're
welcome.
amazing. Thank you for all your help this year, helping me come out of an egg and, maybe almost getting to fly.
I'll be the oldest on there.
I think he did that on his own.
Think about this,
Making me old.
Such an introvert.
the city has had 5 staff planners in its history: Howard Cutler, Brian Little, Skip Baker, myself, Jenny Demshow. You two have seen at least 3 of those, the majority, 3 out of 5.
I watched
Maybe that's on
Howard,
here.
Howard with his colored, not here, with his colored pencils up at the racquetball club. Recoding thing, if he didn't like where it was, and that had been an orange area. Orange.
So you remember?
Oh, yeah, I remember him, and he would tap dance by the swimming pool.
Huh?
And play his guitar. So I remember him as a person.
I see.
Brian Little, for another reason, I remember.
So did
For a lot
your,
of reasons.
is your maps gonna be presented tomorrow?
I mean, it's just showing public space. I think it would be an appropriate place to do that, so.
Let's just save it for the.
I hope you do. Yeah.
Okey-dokey.
That will be informative.
It'll be a good kind of the area. It'll be a good foundation of
Ground
discussion.
we're protecting.
All right.
Inside yard.
It's ground zero.
Sticking with us out there?
Ground